What's up, everybody? Happy Friday. Welcome back to the channel for another episode of the Ask Me Anything series. With the NHL draft just happening and free agency opening up tomorrow, there is tons to talk about right now when it comes to the NHL. As always, you guys asked a ton of awesome questions, so I want to give a huge thank you to every single one of you who took the time to come up with a question and leave it on the post. I wish I could feature them all, but just know I read every single one and I appreciate all of you guys. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get this episode started with the first question from Oliver Baranka, who says, was Ryan the right pick for the Canadians? Being a Habs fan, I was pretty shocked when they picked him over Michkov and Leonard. I'm willing to be open-minded, but I'm curious as to what you think his NHL projection looks like, and also really appreciate the support. Obviously, it's going to take a really long time to truly see if he was the right or wrong pick for the Montreal Canadiens at 5th overall, but Ryan Bacher is a fantastic prospect. This is a defenseman who has good size, already plays a really complete game for being just 18 years old, and the Montreal Canadiens really didn't have a blue-chip prospect on the right side in the system. Now you do, and David Reinbacher to go along with having Lane Hutson in the pipeline on the left side. For me personally, I really don't see anything wrong with the pick. I think Reinbacher is going to be a really good top 4 two-way defenseman for the Canadiens. The next question we have comes from Chicago, who says, now that Bedard is officially a Hawk and their expectation that they'll be a bottom dweller again next season, at least with some identity this time, when do you see them getting back into contention? And also really appreciate the kind words. The Blackhawks are definitely still in the early stages of their rebuild. They're only really 1 year removed from completely tearing it down. That being said, getting a player like Connor Bedard speeds up a rebuild exponentially. I would not be surprised if the Chicago Blackhawks 2-3 years from now are back into, playoff contention, maybe not Stanley Cup contenders. Now that you have Connor Bedard, it's going to be a lot easier to make players want to come play for your team. Guys are going to want to play with Connor Bedard. Obviously, the Blackhawks are a historic franchise as well, an original 6 team. The Blackhawks still have a ton of draft picks in the first 3 rounds of the next 3 NHL drafts that they could obviously use to draft prospects with, or they could use as trade chips. They already have the makings of a really good young core, now led by Connor Bedard, but also the likes of Frank Nazar, Kevin Korchinski, Lucas Reichel. This isn't a rebuild that I think is going to stretch out, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. This next question comes from Years28, who says, what are your thoughts on the state of the Briere in Philly? I never thought I'd see them make the moves they're making, taking a chance on the biggest wildcard in the draft, drafting undersized yet highly skilled players, working to move bad contracts, etc. Would love to hear your thoughts on the start of their rebuild. Also, really appreciate the support. I think Danny Briere has done a really good job so far in the short time that he's been general manager of the Flyers. At least now, as a Flyers fan, you can look at the team and say that they have a direction, and that is something I feel like you weren't able to say about the Philadelphia Flyers for a really long time. Briere's first trade as Flyers GM, the Provorov trade, I think he got a fantastic return. Like you mentioned, moving out bad contracts, and I really love the decision to take Matvei Michkov 7th overall. Like, say 10 years from now, if we look back at this 2023 NHL draft, I don't really think anyone's going to be too surprised if Matvei Michkov ends up being, the 2nd or 3rd best player from this draft class. Is he a wild card? Yes. Is he going to take a while likely to come over to the NHL? Yes, but it's probably going to be a while before the Philadelphia Flyers are back in playoff contention anyways. This is an organization that can afford to be patient with their prospects, and you have to be with a player like Michkov, but I definitely think he's going to be well worth the wait. The next question we have comes from Luna Chicken Shell, who says, what do the Buffalo Sabres do with their goaltending this offseason? Do you think they start the year with Levi as the starter, or maybe sign a veteran goalie to a short contract, or possibly something else? And also really appreciate the support. I honestly don't see the Buffalo Sabres doing anything else this offseason in terms of addressing their goaltending situation. They re-signed Eric Comrie to a 1-year, $1.8 million deal. You don't pay a guy $1.8 million to, be your 3rd or 4th string goaltender in most cases, so I feel like the expectation is he's going to be either the starter or the backup heading into next season. I feel like Devin Levi proved towards the end of last season that he's ready, he can compete at the NHL level, so I feel like Buffalo is probably going to head into next season with Comrie and Levi as the 1-2 punch in net. As far as who the starter is going to be, I would say probably just whoever has the better training camp in preseason, and they still have Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, who played a good chunk of games at the NHL level this past season, so I'm sure he factors into things somewhere. Given the fact that those 3 guys are all under contract heading into next season, I can't really see them going out and getting another goaltender. Moving along now, the next question we have comes from Walker, the LA sports fan, who says, I honestly think that the Kings made a mistake in trading for PLD. Our goalie situation is still a huge question mark to be answered. Copley is a wildcard in himself because he has never started a huge chunk of the season before. What's your input on the trade? Did you think LA made the right decision, and how do you think this will pan out for both Winnipeg and Los Angeles? I've seen a lot of differing opinions opinions when it comes to this trade. Basically, where I stand is I think Pierre-Luc Dubois is a really good player, but I also think that the Los Angeles Kings gave up, quite a lot. Two really good top 6 guys in Velarde and Iafallo. I'm just not completely convinced that this trade makes the Kings exponentially better. There's somebody else on the Winnipeg Jets that I feel like it would have made a lot more sense for the Kings to really target and try to get, and that is Connor Hellebuck. Talk about addressing your goaltending situation, getting, a perennial Vezina Trophy candidate. Now, obviously, we don't know what the asking price is for Connor Hellebuck, what type of extension he would be looking for if he even wanted to sign in Los Angeles, all that kind of stuff we don't know, but I definitely thought it was a little bit of a bold move to go out and make a blockbuster trade like this, spend those kind of assets when right now your starting goaltender, you're under contract, is Phoenix Copley. So yeah, that's basically where I'm at. I'm pretty iffy on the trade. This next question comes from Riley Rogers, who says, if you were to make a DeBrincat trade with the Wings, what kind of return could it look like for the Senators, and what would you be content with giving up in exchange? I personally would trade the Bruins 2024 first, a second round pick, and a B-level prospect. And also really appreciate the kind words. So I actually tweeted out a mock trade idea between the Ottawa Senators and Red Wings for DeBrincat yesterday, and it got a lot of mixed replies. I'll be interested to hear what you guys think. It was Kyler Yamamoto. Obviously, you have to switch him out now because it just came out that Detroit is actually buying him out. So I'll switch him with, let's say, Michael Rasmussen, a 2024 first, probably Boston's, a 2024 second, Donovan Sabrango. That's kind of the idea that I had, and a lot of Red Wings fans were replying to that tweet saying, like, that's too much. Honestly, for me personally, I don't know if that's enough. I think the majority of you guys know how I feel about the DeBrincat situation. I really want him in Detroit. I think he is exactly the kind of player that the Red Wings need. This is a team that sorely lacks goal scoring, and you gotta score goals to win games. The Wings only had 3 20-plus goal scorers this past season: Larkin, Kubalik, and Perron. Larkin probably only one of those 3 that factors into the long-term plans. It's not often players like Alex DeBrincat are made available for trade. This is a guy who fits the timeline for the Red Wings rebuild. He already has 2 40-plus goal seasons under his belt, and the kicker is he wants to play in Detroit. The Red Wings gotta make this happen. I just think it makes way too much sense, and it's too good of an opportunity to pass up. The next question we have comes from Hatcher Kane, who says, thoughts on Yzerman's draft choices in number 9, Nate Danielson, and number 17, Axel Sandin Pellikka. Selecting Nate Danielson at number 9 definitely threw me off a little bit, threw me for a little bit of a loop. I think it's safe to say Yzerman passed up on a handful of guys with a much higher ceiling than Nate Danielson, similar to what I said about Montreal taking Reinbacher, but Nate Danielson has a really high floor. This is a guy who plays a really strong two-way game. He's a solid skater, a solid leader. He's the captain of his junior team. Center ice is a position of need for the Red Wings, so I certainly think Steve Yzerman took that into account when taking Danielson here. Even if Nate Danielson just develops into a really good third-line center, I will take that as a win. And then you have, Larkin, Casper, Danielson down the middle. That doesn't sound too bad. As far as Sandin Pellikka at number 17, I really like this pick. A lot of mock drafts I've seen had him going a lot higher. It addresses another position of need for the Red Wings, and that is a right shot defenseman, especially after trading Philip Hronek to Vancouver. There's, a pretty gaping hole on that right side, and one that hopefully Axel Sandin Pellikka can fill for the Red Wings one day. So overall, based on what I know about these players, I'm really content with the picks. Moving on, this next pick comes from Broads, who says, which players do you think are the biggest steals from the drafts? I'll be honest, I'm not really all that familiar with the majority of the prospects that were selected outside of the first round, so I'm just going to give you some guys that I think could be steals based on the limited amount of knowledge I have about a lot of these prospects. First, this is a pretty obvious one. I think Matvei Michkov at 7 is going to look like a steal one day. Can you say that a player was a steal even though they were drafted in the top 10? I think you can if they end up being, the second or third best player from the class. Gabe Perreault out of the U.S. National Development Team going 23rd overall to the Rangers. I think they got fantastic value there. I was really surprised to see Perreault slip out of the top 15. The dude put up absolutely absurd numbers this past season, and I know that doesn't always translate to NHL success, but just based off of the upside alone, again, I think it's really good value for the Rangers. And the last name I'll throw out there, Andrew Cristall, 40th overall pick by the Washington Capitals. Pretty much every mock draft I saw had Crystal going in the first round, so I was pretty surprised to see him slide out of the first round. I think Washington got amazing value with him at 40th overall. The dude had almost 100 points in just 54 games with the Kelowna Rockets this past season. Tons of upside there, so I think that was a really good pick by Washington. Moving on now, this next question comes from Alfie's Mullet, who says, which offseason trade that was made so far will have the biggest effect on next year's standings? This is a really interesting question. My answer might surprise some people, I'm going to go with the Columbus Blue Jackets acquiring the rights to Damon Severson and then signing him to an extension. I love Damon Severson. He was set to become the best UFA defenseman on the market this summer before Columbus scooped him up. I expect Columbus to be much higher in the standings this upcoming season than they were last season, of course, where they finished dead last in the league. Now, I don't think it's all going to be because of Damon Severson. They're going to get a lot of guys back from injury. They now have Provorov as well, Adam Fantilli, if he makes the jump to the NHL right away. I expect Columbus to be a much improved team, and again, I don't think, the only reason why they're going to shoot up the standings is because of Severson, but I think he's going to be a big part of their improvement. Next up, this question comes from Hugh Barkhurst, who says, do you think the Bruins will have to move on from one of their goalies, and if so, who do you think it will be? I don't think Boston necessarily has to get rid of one of them. It doesn't hurt to have two fantastic goalies, but given the fact that Swayman is an RFA in need of a massive raise, Linus Ullmark already makes $5 million a season through 2024-25. It definitely makes sense for Boston to at least explore the option of moving one of those guys. If they are going to trade one of them, I feel like it'll be Swayman. I mean, are they really going to look to move Linus Ullmark, who just had one of the greatest regular seasons by a goaltender in NHL history, won the Vezina Trophy? I feel like Jeremy Swayman is a very valuable trade chip because he is only 24 years old. He's already shown so much promise, and whatever team trades for Jeremy Swayman, you're getting, the goaltender of your future, someone who's likely going to be there for a really long time. I'm actually really intrigued to see what the Bruins decide to do with Ullmark and Swayman. Maybe a team like the Los Angeles Kings, who, we were talking about their goaltending situation earlier in the video, could go after a guy like Swayman. The next question we have comes from Anonymous, who says, what direction should the Jets take? Do they blow it up and rebuild, or retool and try to stay competitive? I think the latter of the two for sure. Go through a retool and try to stay competitive, and I feel like based on the return that they got for Pierre-Luc Dubois, that's the direction they are taking. The Jets also made news today buying out Blake Wheeler. This is a roster that's going to look a lot different next season. We don't really know if they plan on holding on to Mark Scheifele, if Hellebuck ends up getting traded, but looking at the roster now, they still have a really good core there. Gabe Velarde now, Alex Iafallo, Ehlers, Connor, Morrissey, and you have some pretty good young, promising prospects and young players as well, like Cole Perfetti, Colby Barlow, who they selected in the 2023 draft, Brad Lambert, and that's not even including Scheifele or Hellebuck, whose futures are up in the air. But if they look to move those guys, they're probably going to get pretty big hauls for each of them as well, similar to what they got for Dubois. Next up, this question comes from Thylacine, who says, with no real big trades at the draft, how active will the trade market be in the UFA RFA window, and will there be any surprises? I'm definitely expecting the trade market to be really active throughout the offseason, especially considering the fact that the free agency market is pretty weak, so teams are probably going to look to address different needs through trade as opposed to free agency. And as far as will there be any surprises, I mean, I'm expecting there will be at least a couple. I mean, there usually is every offseason. And now for the final question of this episode, this one comes from mum_811, who says, what was the biggest surprise pick from the draft? And also really appreciate the support and thank you for sticking around so long. This is actually an easy one for me. I definitely feel like it was Anaheim taking Leo Carlsson at number 2 as opposed to Adam Fantilli. For me, I thought Adam Fantilli was an absolute lock to go second overall heading into the draft. I wasn't even really thinking about the first and second overall picks because I figured it was going to be Bedard, Fantilli, and then after that was when things could start to get interesting. That's not to say Anaheim made a bad pick by any means. I think Carlson's going to be a great player. They obviously really liked him using that second overall pick on him, but it just really shocked me. So that is going to wrap up this episode of the Ask Me Anything series. Again, like I said at the beginning, huge thank you to everybody who participated, everyone who submitted a question. You guys make this series so much fun for me to do. If you guys enjoyed this video and you want another episode in the next week or so, then be sure to leave it a like. That's the best way to show your support. And most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this all summer long, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you all soon.